Well, everybody, I'm super excited as always because my guest today, um, I feel like I'm completing the perfect pair. We've had Phil Rulloda on like a little over a year ago, and now we have his wife, Cathy. Welcome, Cathy, to the Flower Podcast.
Well, Scott, thank you so much. It's just an honor and a privilege to speak with you today. I'm really enjoy your episodes and your commitment to bring such diverse vision to the industry and cover so many bases that it's just a great opportunity to share some of my information with you.
Well, I appreciate your time. I know um, the vast experience that both you, especially, and Phil have had, and the impact you both have had. It felt like it was time to make sure we had you on, and I always start at the beginning. And I would love to know. So, how did you find your way into the world of flowers?
Wow, it was kind of accidental, I suppose, when my friends were starting to flip burgers in high school for money. I didn't want to do that and walked into the only flower shop in my little town. I grew up in St. Albans, West Virginia, and told the owner that I would work for free after school and on the weekends until he thought I was good enough to hire. And I don't even know if you can legally do that these days, but I
What a
did
great
go after.
technique.
Yeah, but I would go in after school when I had opportunities or Saturdays, and they were open Sunday mornings too for 4 hours. So help out here and there. So the very first day I showed up, this is how by baptism in the industry. He in those days, every arrangement had a bow or four in it. I mean, a lot of ribbon was used in arrangements. This has been a while. And so he said, well, if you're going to be in work in a flower shop, you have to learn how to tie a bow. Now, this was a busy shop. There were 6 full-time designers, a couple
Wow.
full-time drivers, 4 full-time office workers in just this little town, but we serviced a lot of the smaller communities around. Anyway, he sat me down and showed me how to do a number 3 bow, right? Number 3
Hmm.
bow. Great.
Hmm.
So I sat there for 2, 3 hours and tied bows, and they got better. And he came to me and said, "Oh, I bet you're tired of doing that. I'm going to have you do something else." I'm like, "Oh, great. Here's the number 9 ribbon because we have a lot of for pot bows." Okay. So a couple hours doing number 9. Then comes along with the number 40. Oh, I got to have that for the funeral arrangements, the big rose arrangements. So I literally sat for 8 hours tying bows. And I think that was a way of showing me that it's not all fun and games. It's not all pretty flowers, that the industries, the businesses, and the fact that I showed up the next day, I think kind of made him feel like, okay, maybe this will work out. And actually, I did work after school and on the weekends. And even in the summer, they hired me full time because people would take vacation. I could fill in doing different things. Anyway, I go away to college. I have a bachelor degree in music theory and composition from West Virginia University. But in the meantime, I worked sometimes on the weekends at a flower shop, or I'd help out doing different things. I was really involved with music, so I didn't have as much free time. And then I got accepted into the master's program at the University of Southern California. Came to California. I was, believe it or not, a graduate assistant band director with the marching band.
Oh my
But
goodness.
LA is a very pricey place to live. So I took a part-time job working in a flower shop. And the shop that I worked at was extremely busy. It was a franchise. And the franchise owner was opening a second store. And when I finished all my coursework, I didn't really know what I wanted to do because to work in the field, I was going to have to probably go do a doctorate, and I was really fried. But he said to me, "Why don't you manage my new store?" And I thought, well, I could do this for a while. Why not? It's something to keep me busy and pay the bills. So the store opened up on Mother's Day weekend, on the
Oh no.
Friday of Mother's Day weekend, and was open 24 hours a day till it closed at 9 o'clock on Sunday night.
Oh my
Isn't
gosh.
that lucky, you know?
Never heard of 24 hours a day.
24 hours open, and we would get the cooler full, and at 2 o'clock in the morning somebody would come in and buy like all this stuff, and then you'd be like, oh my gosh, kill me now, you know. So we did have help, but it was baptism by fire. Anyway, this again was a franchise. And when I was working in the store, one of the operations employees from the corporate office came in and said, basically, what are you doing here? Why are you here? You're not really overqualified to run this shop. And I said, well, I don't know what I want to do. I'm trying to think about it. And she said, we need somebody like you in the office. I thought, oh, okay. So they came in, brought me in for an interview, and I was hired, and I was working in the operations department. And part of my job, because I was a designer, as also because I had experience in working in retail in the shops, that they assigned me to help open new stores because I had done that. But oh my gosh, those are crazy days.
You enjoyed it so much, you want to just go on the road doing that everywhere.
We would, we did. We had helped open new stores up in the Bay Area. I mean, it was really quite an undertaking because you're training staff, you're getting things open, and because these were major signaled intersections, immediately there was huge volume. I mean, back in the 80s, the average store volume there was about 700,000 a year. So they were busy locations. You can think about what that money would buy today.
Right.
So anyway, I'm working in the shop, and it also was doing consulting work with the shops, the businesses that weren't meeting their numbers. Maybe their sales weren't enough. Maybe they were having too much payroll. So because we at the corporate offices did all the bookkeeping for all the stores, so we had the knowledge of what well-run stores were doing and what some that needed help. So I was assigned to consult with and sort of work really closely with some of the people that were having challenges. Anyway, the company decided that they really wanted to improve the design game across the franchisees. And this was back when Dutch design was all the rage. It was the new thing. And the Flower Council of Holland was bringing designers over and so forth. So we had contracted with a Dutch designer to come and teach classes for the designers in the corporate stores, as well as some of the franchisees, head designers. And so company said, okay, we want you to help him. And so he's teaching a class in San Diego, and we want you to attend this class. I'm like, okay, I'll go. And went to the class, and the teacher was fantastic. He's a designer you probably know or heard of, is Renee Van Rems.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I mean, and Renee is he's just a wonderful person. He's not only a fantastic designer, he's just well thought, and just really a great guy. So, but I didn't know him. I mean, I'm showing up first day of class. He knows the corporate office is sending me, and we're going to work together. I'm going to help him when he's teaching. On the front, so I hide in the back row of the class. I'm not confident, right? I'm like, I don't want anybody to see what I'm doing, because I didn't have that much. I was an experienced designer, but we're traditional work. The front row of the class was this guy. And the guy, he was kind of, really sure of himself. And Renee kept looking at him and saying, well, what do you think? Do you agree? And I was like, why is this teacher asking this guy who's a student, what he feels like? Well, turns out this guy in the back row, I'm making copying an arrangement that the teacher had made. And there were a gladiola, sometimes the glads have these beautiful curves in them, right? So that when you're trying to do a line arrangement, it's a challenge. Well, I wasn't really experienced enough to know how to really work with that curve. I was just always used to straight glads. So I cut the stem above the curve in the glad. And this guy comes around, the guy in the front row comes around, and he looks at me and he says, oh, I bet your boyfriend's a midget. Because you cut your flowers off. Why did you take a gladiola that would have been worth $5 or $6 and chop it down? And I thought, who is this fella? Well, the guy's name was Phil Rulloda. Of course. And I was like, oh man, guys, So anyway, Phil and I's paths crossed, a number of times at both the big top 10 competition California Designer of the Year, as well as he was doing a program at the Cal State Floral Association convention. That time it was in Santa Barbara. And I came to watch the program, and he calls me from the audience to come up and assist him. Oh my gosh, I was just nervous as a wreck, because by that time I knew who Phil Rulloda was. I was like, this guy's really good. So I'm there taping and wiring. He's making a bridal bouquet, and Stefan noticed it, and all these flowers. And somebody in the audience put their hand up and said, well, how long will a bouquet like that last? The typical questions are, how long is it going to last, and how much are you going to charge for it? Those are the two most popular questions, which
Sure.
every designer's like, oh gosh. Anyway, Phil's answer was, well, the bouquet is probably going to last longer than the marriage.
Wow.
He's something. And long story short, we started dating a few months later. And here we are. We're having our 35th wedding anniversary this year. So that is a long way to say. And then, well, of course, then Phil helped me raise the funds to open my own shop. And then from there, I had a lot of opportunities to I took a lot of education classes and worked really hard, and had an opportunity, was invited to be on a national education team. So a lot of stuff. That's a long story, but it's pretty funny.
That is funny. I did not know that. That's pretty cool. It's funny how you shared that story, but Phil didn't. So I love that. So I think that's great. Well, and now you and Phil both run the school, the Southern California School of Floral Design.
Yes, we both teach. Phil's obviously internationally known for his tropical contemporary design, and he can do any type of style. And I think my experience, having been in retail, because I owned a shop for over 30 years, have the sort of have a different approach, because I have been behind the bench for a lot of years, dealing with consumers and dealing with payroll and all those things. So when we have beginner students, especially, trying to impart to them, it's how serious it is if you're going to approach having a business. So I think it's a good blend of, and our styles are, of course, obviously he's influenced my style tremendously, but my style tends to be a little bit more feminine, more softer here and there. But we Phil, obviously, if we were a competition, I'd lose every time. But he's he's great in that he has a master of technique. And so he really drills into the students how important the technique is, because once they're gone from working with us, we want them, those techniques, to be able to be carried forward so that they can think their way through other challenges.
Right. And that's really the gift, or the main talent or skill that you impart, because everyone gets thrown curveballs every which way, and it's how you juggle that and work through that.
Well, some of the students sometimes say, oh, I'll never do this type of arrangement, or what, something that's a more classic piece. But they understand that if you can understand these basic techniques, that they can be applied to so many other types of designs. Because if the construction if the flowers aren't cared for first, if the construction isn't made well, then all that work that you put in to create the design is for naught, because it either falls apart before it's delivered, or it's doesn't last, and the consumer's unhappy. So we want to make sure that they get how important the basic steps are, so that they can like first, crawl, walk, run, fly.
Yeah.
But every step needs to be followed.
So it's my understanding, and maybe this was through your retail shop, that you did flowers, or were in charge of flowers, for one of the Olympics there in LA, I guess.
Well, that was during my corporate days. But
Okay.
it was in between when I met Phil and I opened my shop. Worked for a major florist corporation, and had 73 franchises. They got the bid to do the flowers for the Olympics when it was in Los Angeles in 1984. And it's interesting. I when the Olympics were coming to Atlanta, several of our friends, Georgia friends, called and said, "Well, what do we need to do to get an appointment?" Well, because they knew I had experience there. And I said, "Well, the first thing you need to do is to tell them how much money you're going to give them to be the official florist." And they're like, and this one gal says to me, "You're bursting my bubble." And I said, "I'm really sorry, but that's the way it works. Is that to become the official, it actually costs, because that's everybody wants to do that. So the company's going, and in the case, the company I work for, it was about $250,000 in flowers and product and services over the course of the Olympics. So that's a lot of money, and especially in the 80s. It was interesting because in the office, there was pretty decent sized corporate staff, but I was the only designer. So in preparation, there were, a lot of people that had opinions about what the flowers should look like, what they should be. And there were these group of look coordinators. And they actually did a fantastic job choosing the colors and that festive federalism. The whole look and feel of the Olympics was interesting, but they were adamant that no traditional flowers could be used for any of the work. They wanted only unique and unusual things, which meant no roses, no carnations, no chrysanthemums, anything that was, first of all, easily obtained. Plus the heat in, Olympics were in July, August, and as 90, 100 degrees. So things were, trying to use things that would hold up, because we're doing the athletes' awards bouquets, the venue arrangements, the hotel arrangements. And, the hotel wasn't that difficult because, always we're going to use more unique flowers, but doing the venues. So and the athletes' award bouquets were really unique because the city flower of Los Angeles is a bird of paradise. And so they wanted those featured prominently throughout, except for they're not really in season in, July and August. So a lot of those had to be brought in from out of the country, or at least out, offshore from, here. Anyway, so it was interesting because of the heat, working in warehouses, and the venues were for the Olympics were spread out from all the way in South Orange County to way up above Los Angeles. And so sometimes we'd have 3 bouquets have to be there, and they typically had to be delivered before 6 or 7 a.m. because of security and trying to get the logistics. And so that's what I try to tell people when they're interested in doing these kind of projects, is that you really get intoxicated about the design, but the logistics and all the processing and things that have to happen are so much as important, actually more important in many cases, because if they don't get there, it doesn't matter if you made them or not. So but it was so hot, and some of the feature things included iris because of the blue color. They wanted that blue, and those days that was the big blue flower, right? And we had to literally work in the coolers to make the arrangements, because if we put them in the warehouse where we were working, they even with the temperature controls, you could really watch them open while you're working. So I remember spending a couple of days working in a cooler. I would not recommend that to anybody, by the way.
It's cold.
Yeah, but it was interesting experience to help with such big productions, and to been entrusted with overseeing a project like that when I was so young. So it was a great opportunity.
Well, I don't know if I've shared this on a podcast before, but in let me see, 1996 is when they were in Atlanta, I believe. And I was working in Atlanta at a wholesaler, and their big thing was sunflowers. They wanted sunflowers in every bouquet. And I mean, it was just, in fact, they were trying at one point to literally, I think at one of the major events, like for everybody in the stadium to have a sunflower. And wow. I don't even know if that ever happened, because it kept the numbers and the math and the dollars. I mean, that's just so much. And then, of course, they're going to be dead in 2 hours because they're out of water, and all of that. And it's, like you said, it's summer in Atlanta. So it's, it's hot. But I did have the opportunity, and yeah, I want to just touch on the logistical side of that, like you already commented. It's like you have no clue what logistics are until you have to do something on that scale because of security, because they're putting mirrors under the vans. You have to have lock boxes like on your vans, and I mean it's a whole thing. And I don't know. I'm sure if you don't know her, Phil probably does. She used to be with AIFD, Susie Piero. I don't know if you know her.
Right.
Remember
Oh,
that
sure.
name?
Yeah.
So she had a flower shop for the athletic village,
Yeah.
And so I had to meet her down there every morning and like at 5 a.m. and she had to get flowers because she had to get through security by 7. And so she had product to work with. And then every night I was lucky I got a pass because sometimes I had to literally walk flowers into the village and get, because she run out of something and that was the only way you could physically, you couldn't drive a van in. They weren't allowed at that point after
Right.
a certain time. But so I can imagine I mean, that's just one little piece of it. For you to have that whole humongous thing,
delivering to the official Olympic Hotel, which was the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. It's a beautiful hotel, very storied, but it's very old. And we were originally supposed to do these. I mean, I had these massive lobby arrangements that were like 15 feet high. We had different, levels of designs in them, and they came way up. But I mean, we obviously finished constructing them on site, but they wanted us to go down into the lower. There's a lower delivery area that's maybe it's below, and then take the elevators up with all these flowers. The problem is when the hotel was built, it was one of those very old, and the elevator doors were super small. So we were literally deconstructing the arrangements. It just took hours. And I finally, after about the second installation, I just said to security, and they bring the dogs and the mirrors and all that. And I just said to them, look, I can come in here at 5 o'clock in the morning when there's nobody around. I'm pulling up to the front of the hotel. You bring the dogs out in the mirrors, and we're coming in through the doors. We cannot do this because it was just such a logistic nightmare to get in these tiny little, it was service elevators, not the guest elevators, like the service elevator that you would put a cart, a room service cart in. So anyway, I finally just put my foot down and just said we can't. And after that, they did let us do that, but it was just really, you have to. Obviously, I think you probably couldn't get away with it these days because security is even more strict now than it was back then. But everybody has to work together to make sure that everything gets done well. So. But yeah, one of the things when I mentioned about the look coordinator saying they didn't want any common flowers and so forth, that I really, really hope that when the Olympics come back here in 2028, that they focus on American grown flowers and use, a variety of different things that really sing to what this country can bring to floriculture and horticulture, and bring in Hawaii, bring in, all these beautiful things that are from Florida and California, of course, and glads from Michigan, and all these, especially flower growers, I'm sure could help to hone a message about the beauty of what we grow here in this country.
Yeah, I thoroughly love that idea, especially if they can just take a moment to make it sure it's seasonally appropriate. I'm not asking for birds out of season or something else crazy like that. But yeah, I definitely think that would be an awesome statement. I mean, what an incredible statement that would make to the entire world, actually. I love that. Well, Cathy, I know one thing that you haven't been in the industry as long as you have been, and the incredible experiences you've had. One thing I know, I never really thought about this. We were talking a month and a half ago or so, and it's just the idea of women in in the realm of floral design. My lifetime, I've always known it to be, I don't know, 70 to 80% women. I've never known it any other way. And, when we were talking, I was like, gosh, I can't believe no one ever talks about the history of this and just the progression. And I just love to, kind of get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I do think I've seen a wonderful growth of the recognition of women in the industry over the years. Looking back, AIFD actually had a number of women leaders from its inception in the 60s. And yet on the stage, sometimes there'd be mostly male presenters. I think my first symposium was back in the 90s, and it was in the 80s. And I only really recall one woman who was doing a program, and thought, man, oh man, where are the women? And then I think there was a fair amount of complaints because 80% of floral designers are primarily women. So I got a call. This is not how to win friends and influence people. I got a call from somebody who was putting together programs for a national symposium and said, well, we get complaints that we don't have enough women on the stage. So we're going to do this program called Designing Women. And they want myself and 3 other younger females to do this program. And, but there was like no budget for flowers. You have to bring your own stuff, you pay your own hotel, pay everything, but there's no no compensation, but just come and do this program. And I just said to the person on the phone, I'll tell you what, when you feel like I'm ready to do a program, as not because of me being a woman, I'd be happy to do a program, but to lump us all together is just not going to happen. And I think the program never came to be, because I attended that symposium that year, but I was really, I got a lot of wicked looks from some of these guys. And, I feel like if you don't speak up, and you don't have to be mean about it, but just don't articulate that we just don't need to be put all pushed together as a group as a woman designer. I mean, this summer at symposium, oh my goodness, the female program presenters were spectacular, as well as the guys. But there's just so much recognition of great women designers. And I mean, you can just name them off: Debbie de la Flora and Tony Gilliam and Ellie Lynn, and I mean, just on and on and on. And to see the recognition of the leadership, and to see that women, get out there and compete. But the thing is, if you don't put yourself out there as a competitor and as working and networking with other people, people won't know who you are. So I think that was more part of it, was women weren't being assertive enough. But I think of like Rocky Pollitz, who really gave so many women like myself an opportunity to be seen and heard, and really did, not just because I was a woman, but she felt that, we needed to reflect in our presenters also what people that were in the audience. So.
No, I mean, like today, I don't think anything about that, but because I think of going back to like Constance Spry and some of these women that were innovation, were visionaries in their time. And I'm really excited to see the progress with that. Obviously, I just feel like it's even like you describing your differences in your design style versus Phil. Saying it's softer, it's more feminine. I mean, it's like, not that there's anything wrong with Phil's design style, but it's just different. And it's like, it's a different perspective that we need, I think, in the floral industry to help represent who the majority, honestly, of flowers are for, right? And whether it's weddings, events, or, gifts being given, Mother's Day, Valentine's, I mean, you know what I'm saying? The majority of flowers, I feel like, end up going to women, and, in some capacity. And I feel like it should reflect that, I think.
Well, I just, the thing is just really
Am I stirring it up?
no, we just, it's just a recognition that I think as time has moved on, that we've been reaching out to embrace all kinds of different diversities in culture, to see and to learn and to have respect. And that just really comes down to taking the time to, and also the same thing about relationship building. When you're friends with people and you can see their work, you're more likely to say, oh, recommend them and do that. So like a lot of it goes back to networking.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I feel like sometimes, you brought it up in a different way earlier when you said, like you might have been intimidated, so you sat on the back row, or, a lot of times that happens where we feel like we're not worthy, or we don't want to be in the limelight for whatever reason, and we miss those opportunities. And just, do you mind sharing something about that? Because I feel like we need to make people more emboldened to do that.
Well, the best calling card anybody can ever have is a flower. All right. So I remember
Sure.
I've been involved with social media since many, many years. Not as active as I used to be now, but back in the earlier days of Twitter, at X now, but at Twitter, there were local tweet ups that would happen. The Orange County Register, which is our biggest newspaper here, had sponsored one, and they would invite people to come. And I would say it was when the tweets meet the streets, because there's the virtual land of social media, but really what really pays off for local florists is meeting the people, not just tweeting out your work, or Instagramming or whatever. It's when you make a connection with somebody. And one of the things that we did back in that every tweet up we went to, we found out where the location was. We made flower arrangement, really beautiful one, and we took individually wrapped flowers with just our Twitter handle on it, a little card. That's it. And do you know how many weddings I booked off of those relationships that I made? Because wow. I think, like I said, and everything was packaged beautifully, but going in person, and when you have a flower to give to somebody, and it doesn't have to be a lot, it just has to be something really pretty. I mean, we're in Orange County, so I always had orange roses, which makes sense. And every single person, and then so many people would on Twitter the next day take a picture and put it on Twitter and tag my business. Or they would, even 3 days, one of them did like 6 days later, this is still beautiful from, blah, 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 blah. So that networking where I do think, obviously social media is extremely important to small businesses, but it's sort of more passive to just share your stuff. And it's really about engaging, and especially when you're a local florist, that you engage with likely clients. And so because you can be really popular on the internet and not have any business. There's two different things. One doesn't always lead to the other. And it's the same thing, I'm sure, with these flower farmers, is that they can put out beautiful things, but it's connecting with the people in their own local markets and hosting an event that is Instagrammable, right? So as opposed to just putting out pictures of their things and waiting for somebody to come to them. So I think that networking is, but again, flowers, best calling card ever.
I agree. And it's that connection. And so many times through social media, or we're on our phones, right? We're on our phones about everything. And we sometimes miss that personal connection. I mean, we've been living in this home for like 3 months, and I just met my neighbor next door. Nicest guy ever, and it's just didn't have the opportunity. And I just, he was outside, and I went up to him because I'm like, and it's like and of course he made a comment because we grow a lot of flowers, and so he, saw the flowers, and him and his wife commented about that, and it's like, but it's like, again, flowers, connection, something in common, and it's a way to meet people. And I don't know, I just appreciate you sharing that, because I know that social media is bigger now than ever in so many ways, but I don't think that calling card idea should go away. I feel like we should still be doing that.
Well, I mean, we have, the Pedal It Forward, we have, a lot of different programs where doing things, but this is pretty economical. I mean, when you have one flower and you just have a really pretty little tag, I mean, nowadays I would be doing the QR code,
All right.
and just, that's it. Maybe your logo on the front, QR code on the back, hand out a flower, and not every one of them is going to turn into a customer, but people will remember you.
And they may tell someone else about you that didn't even get a flower.
Well, they may just give that flower to somebody else to pass it on, say they bought it. That happens.
One thing that and just talking to you, and it's kind of like with Phil. Like I feel like I could just talk to you for hours and hours. Is this idea that you mentioned before about storytelling and the importance of storytelling. I mean, you guys have so many students that come through your school and you have so much wisdom to impart. And I mean, we just had Jay Schwanke on the podcast a couple episodes ago, and he was talking about coming to Phil's school. And I'm not sure if you were there at that time. I don't know how long ago it was. But
he was in Phil's school before I met Phil. That's how it goes back.
Okay.
Jay's been a pup for ever.
A minute. but my point is, you have so many things to share, and storytelling to me is an art form that I feel like we could all be better at. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, whether it's a simple story of just a single flower well done, or a huge vignette, or some of these huge trade show displays, there's in the designer's mind, there needs to be a story, a cohesive story that you're trying to tell. And you can tell when people aren't quite organized, or because the story is fractured. And or a mystery, which is even worse, because as a retailer, we really should make it that mysterious. But when we're doing like special event classes, we're talking about telling stories, and about how a great story, has a beginning, middle, and end, and that you're gonna have a crescendo someplace in the design or in the overall, and this where the story is focused on, and then how it needs to have a denouement. And so that there's whether it's just a simple thing or very complex, that if you as a designer can make a clear, not necessarily the word vision, I think it's a clear objective to what you want to tell, and then tell it. And don't have to be, best writers don't tell you flat out, they use a lot of pretty words, and use much more in the way of adjectives, so that then when they are telling the story, there's maybe a little twist and turn, which makes a great arrangement, or makes a great display, but to keep the overall story moving. And I think that's, whether it's, in writing or in music or in any of the arts, really your artists are telling stories. And that's, I mean, the most successful ones have the interest of the audience.
So how does that work like with the events? Because I can tell you that a lot of customers I've had in the past, probably just that concept is lost. It's about the flowers. It's about, it's about the luxury. It's about being over the top. But when you're selling that event, or you're sharing whatever with your customer, I feel like that's that opportunity to engage.
Right. Well, and you're also, obviously budget's always going to be a major driver with a lot of those decisions. But if you, it's like I said, in a in a music composition, if you're doing the first few bars are jazz, and then it's heavy classical, and then contemporary 20th century music, there's no cohesion, there's no story. So you kind of want to pick a lane and pick a point of view and then develop the story so that as people transition in a room from one area to the next, that the story continues, as opposed to here's my thought here and there's another thought over here. And the best designers are really going to be able to tell a story, even with the simplest materials. I helped a local, there's some fantastic events designers in Orange County. And one of the gentlemen, he works out of the wholesale house where we teach our classes. And he had a wedding last year in April, I think it was April, 27,000 quicksand roses. Not one piece of foliage, not any other material. That is it, 27,000 quicksand roses. Spectacular. Because the story obviously was the color and the texture of the roses and gobs of them. And it was at the Ritz-Carlton here in Orange County. And it was just, I think of somebody like that who they just want this really luxurious texture, and how he created so much movement just with just those flowers. And he had 3 guys working for 3 days just cleaning and opening roses. That's all they did, getting them open. So, but that's a big story. And on a smaller story, you know, just even a simple arrangement on a table, the cohesion, is it, you know, is there unity? What kind of story is it telling me? It doesn't have to be a long tale, but it, you know, maybe it's a haiku.
Well, I think that's great. And I think I love being able to kind of give that insight to people to kind of maybe think about it differently as they talk about it to their customers and create it through the whole process. Don't forget the story. I love that. You know, are there like different challenges that you found in working with students, like even now, today? Like a lot of times I feel like so many people think they can just do it all on YouTube or, you know, Google it and figure it out. But I don't know if that is something that, you know, you guys with your school have, is a challenge, or are you getting feedback from students?
Well, we still insist that our classes be in person. We have not gone the online route, just because of the technical execution. I know there's ways you can teach it, but we want to feel like people can see it and we can give real live feedback to people. That we've limited our class sizes during COVID shutdown, and afterwards we decided to accept less students, so we had more space in between people to keep everybody healthy. And the one thing I think that this is not new in the business, but that there's a lack of appreciation of, as I said, logistics and all the other things that have to happen before you can sell a flower arrangement or before you can make a flower arrangement. So trying to instill, especially with the beginners, that, I mean, some of them come to us with visions of opening their own business, and you know, it's a good way to start and get an overview, but to, you know, put the brakes on and go get some experience. Because this sounds bad, but I say, make your mistakes at somebody else's expense. You know, you're going to learn. And because if you don't know what you're doing and you're starting from scratch, you can make a lot of mistakes that can cost you a lot of money. Over the years, it's tragic. We've had people that have come to us after they bought an existing flower shop who overspent and focused on all the wrong things, and were spent thousands and thousands of dollars on redoing an interior and didn't have enough money to pay for a website, you know, because they'd gone through all their savings. We've had people that have got hoodwinked by, you know, some of the bigger national companies to buy these huge point of sale systems that they need something, but not like 4 terminals and things like that when you're just starting out, and signed long-term contracts that they didn't understand. And it's just, you know, one of the things, I mean, I don't want to scare people, but if you plunk down several $100,000, you need to get a return on your investment and need to understand where your money is best spent. So that's one of the things we really try to talk to the beginners about, is don't make these mistakes. And if you're going to, you know, buy a shop, call us. We can help you evaluate whether it's doing that kind of business that they say they are, and also to understand where the plus side and the pitfalls are. So I don't want to scare people, but I want them to have a appreciation that there's much more to know. And especially the people who want to open a store, I go to the community college, take a basic accounting class right now. Because if you understand dollars and the way they work and how to do, a balance sheet and understand a P&L, that you're going to be a lot better off than a lot of florists who don't. So I think we instill the love of design and yet let them know, that to be successful. And we try to help find people work and placement. Many of our students have been hired by freelance design, not freelance, event companies, which they seem to love them because they're hard workers. So that, but I think that getting that experience really makes all the difference in the world. And I just tell them, try to get experience as you really respect. Don't go to the flower shop that you don't think much of, because you'll just learn bad habits. So go to the best shop first, start there.
Well, that's a great point. I love that. And I don't think, it's okay. It's okay to go freelance and learn how other people do things. And I feel like you're absolutely right that that's a way to get additional training and maybe get a paycheck, however that needs to work out. But I mean, I know I freelance for a handful of people, and everyone is so different. Whether it's recipes, whether it's grab from those flowers there and whatever you want. I mean, it's like night and day difference with a lot of these businesses do things. And I feel like you see the pros and cons and benefits, but in the end, it's still a business. And in the end, the flower part, the design part of it is just a small piece of it.
Right. And nothing sucks the joy out of designing is to work very hard for no pay. So it's all fun and games, but this is a career and it's a profession, so if you're going to be a professional, then learn good professional habits so that you can, everybody's going to start out and not be perfect from the beginning, but to model yourself after somebody that you respect and learn and continue learning. Like I said, Phil and I met in a class. Phil and I have both taken classes with Gregor Lurch and a bunch of great designers, and that continuing to learn, and no matter where your position is in the industry or whether you're new or you've been around, there's always something you can learn.
And I think that's really important, because a lot of times people feel like they've gotten to a certain level and they're there, they're at the apex of whatever. And I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like people don't realize that was one of the things that we talked about with Jay was, Jay had studied Ikebana, Jay studied with, Phil, Jay studied, and it's like, there's so many opportunities for learning and incorporating each piece of all of that into whatever makes your style.
Right. And I loved it. Jay talked about, developing your own personal style. And I think that's so important. And it's going to take people a while when they're beginners to figure that out. But I always tell people, okay, every one of us has a default arrangement, like if you have 15 minutes to make something and the truck has got to leave, what are you going to grab? What are you going to make? And we all have that default arrangement in us. And what you want to do when you're growing as a designer is make your default better and better and better, so that it's, starts out pretty basic sometimes and pretty traditional. But when you're, having more experience, that that default that you have to bake really quickly, it's muscle memory. And I think that's when you just keep learning and growing, and then you introduce new things to that default arrangement every time.
I love that idea. That's really great, because you're right. You're right. I mean, when you don't want to have to think about it, then you go to your default. No, that makes sense. One thing I really wanted to ask, because having the experience you have, and I know that a lot of times people develop allergies to things. I know my mother-in-law developed an allergy to alstroemeria, and I know there's a lot of different things that people develop over time. I had a coworker that had an allergy to cut amaryllis. It's like that film that's on the stem. Yeah, it's kind of bizarre. So I'm kind of curious, how do you view that? How do you wrap your brain around that?
Well, I've been evangelical about talking to florists about taking care of their bodily health, because you only have one body. And I developed an allergy to alstroemeria when I was in my 20s. Could not figure out what it was. I mean, because I've been working for years. And I just was baffled. And I really found out about this specialist who's specialized in floriculture and grower allergies that was in North San Diego County. Called to try to get an appointment, and they had like 6-month wait for an appointment. So it was really well known. Yeah. And he talked to me on the phone. He said, look, you can do your own patch test. So what you probably have some suspicions of things you think it might be. So what you do is you take some alcohol, use on the inner arm, and you make clean it off first, and then make tiny little pin pricks, and then put the juice of the flower one spot, the leaf another little spot, and and you can do several different things, and then put band-aids over them and let it set. And if something starts itching in an hour or so, that's your allergy. Well, Phil helped me out, and he smeared the alstroemeria. Still have a mark. It was clear what the challenge was. And, I was like, what am I going to do? It's one of the most popular flowers for long lasting. The price is right. Everything, colors are great. And so I kind of like, okay, well, I'll try gloves. Actually, the only gloves that really, really work are really too dense, too thick to actually have dexterity to do much design work, period. And so I kind of still messed around a little bit with them sometimes, and then I'd break out, and it was just painful. Your mother-in-law, I'm sure, told you, it's just itches. It's like micro poison ivy, and then it's just disgusting just as it progresses. So I was out doing a program in, I can't remember what state it was, and after the program, this lovely woman came up to talk to me, because I usually would mention, no, I don't use alstroemeria, and of course now that's progressed to tulips, because the tulipulin, which is the element that's in both Austro and tulips, and the Dutch call it tulip finger, actually, because apparently it's common with bulb planters. Anyway, she came up to me, and she had an Austro allergy for years. Well, she was in her probably 70s, maybe. She couldn't close her hands anymore, because your collagen in your skin replaces every 7 years naturally. And the elasticity, what had happened was she had burned out her skin so many times that she lost the elasticity to be able to really fully bend her hand shut. And I thought, you know what? And that was based from years of trying to ignore, well, the boss wanted me to use Austro, so I guess that's what I'll do, and I'll just itch. It's like, oh my gosh, I was like, that's got scared. Never touched one since. And when we had customers that came in and wanted some, I'd say, you pick those up. I'm allergic, you're not. Set them on the counter, we'll take care of it for you. Same thing with, I love tulips. They're one of my favorites, but same problem.
Today more than ever, especially over the last 20 years, the volume of flowers that are being pushed out through big box stores, through grocery stores, through all these different avenues that flowers go out. A lot of times florists feel threatened by that. A lot of times they feel like the competition's not fair. And with what what would you tell them?
Well, the most important thing is to don't think of yourself as a commodity. If you are doing the same arrangements and your website is the exact same as 15,000 other shops, or probably not that many anymore, but 5,000, and they have the same products over and over again, then that product becomes a commodity. And so that's why I recommend that any florist that really wants to be distinctive and stand out, shoot your own images. control your website, do the work, learn how to do, take great pictures, learn how to do a little bit of Photoshop to clean up your images, and drive your own story. Because if you just want to sell stems, people can buy stems anywhere. And I think you should offer them for the customers who want them. But if you really need to focus on what can you bring to the table that they can't get somewhere else, and if you can't answer that, then maybe you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. Right? If you're just working to make money, then it's probably not going to be the best driver for you for motivation. So find your story, tell the story of what you do, be really good at it, focus on it, and be known for something that you can do really well. That's my
I love that. And I feel like too, we forget that it's just like you said, it's not a commodity. It's like there's a service, there's an art, there's a design style that you bring to it that even a flower shop a mile down, 2 miles down the road isn't going to bring the same story, to use your word, to that business.
Well, and the thing is that most people get into this industry to be creative, and that's one of the draws. But on the other hand, you do need to learn how to streamline your stories so you're not it's okay to recreate. What you don't want to be is for me, I didn't want to be in a flower factory where I'm stamping out the same thing every day all the time. And that really works for some people, and I give them a lot of credit. But as somebody who's really wants to be a designer, to learn how to use your products, create a menu that is really going to be able to move everything that you carry in your shop or carry in your studio, so that you don't constantly have to buy and stop and get things. You create a menu of the things you have, and then you find these cool ways to use those things that you have, these ingredients already. I love cooking analogies when I'm teaching floral design, because I feel like people can relate to them about, learning your flower names is learning your ingredients, like when you're going to cook. And if you don't know what that ingredient does, why are you using it? Right?
It could be dangerous.
It looks pretty in the jar, but it could be paprika, or it might be cumin, and they're not the same. So, there's, learning to what blends well, what works well. And that comes with experience. And again, that's why I recommend people you'll work somewhere else, work for other people, learn some points of views, freelance, all that stuff.
Sure. No, and I appreciate that. So I want to ask this question because I feel like you have an interesting perspective on it. I often get asked, not all the time anymore, but there was a while there when I lived in Atlanta, I'd get asked the question about wire services. And is that a question am I allowed to ask that question?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, wire services, when I started in the industry, were the glue that held it together.
Right.
They were the driver of education. They were driver of networking. They were driver of opportunity. And, over the years, as the industry has changed and evolved, especially when, I'll just say it because I'm old, but people just roll their eyes. When wire services started offering rebates as incentives for people to send orders through them, all kinds of crazy things happened, and it distorted the industry. So that the point was that even though florists wanted receive orders, they counted on the local business to help drive them. But especially with the web, more and more companies were savvy on the internet and wanted to sell, then shops that all they did was fill orders from other people instead of driving their own story really had a hard time. I had some tragic things happen with some friends of mine who were some of the best designers I've ever met. And I don't say that lightly. And yet they really had a hard time embracing websites. I bought a website for them, stocked it, put everything in, kept it going. The orders came into their store. Things were going fine. And then the end of February, somebody went on their website and ordered a dozen roses for whatever the prevailing price was then, $69.95 or something like that. one of the owners went ballistic because their rose prices were going to be higher for Valentine's Day, and the prices hadn't been changed. And he demanded that the website be taken down altogether, not just change the prices. And I was trying to explain to him wire service math. Okay. Because he was thinking, oh, well, we'll just get orders off the internet, the Mercury machine or whatever, Dove or whatever, and they'll just flow in and we'll just be as busy as possible. And I said to him, okay, they're going to sell, the national companies are going to sell these flowers for, say, $80. It's $10 difference, whatever it was. By the time you take out the fees and the commissions and the cost, you're actually going to have far less money than if you had just kept that $69.95 order and kept the local customer, because they're going to be able to order from you online. And I said, people are shopping after you close and before you open. And if you don't have a website, they're just going to find somebody else who does. And you're going to be silly. And nothing I said could change his mind. He just, nope, we're done with the website. And the shop's gone. And it's just, I mean, I literally cried because that couldn't explain well enough why it's so important to have 100% of your dollars, even at a lower price, than to have a higher priced incoming order. Having, been on the road on the education team for one of the major wire services for 18 years, I had a lot of opportunities. I met some of the best people in the world. I networked with some of the best designers in the world. And it was really difficult, when I realized what was happening at my own shop with the kind of craziness that's going on. The biggest challenge for me was the order gatherers, because they would sell anything. And this was when this is kind of when it first started. We would get these orders and for product, like even for wire service branded licensed products that were not even shipped to the stores yet. So here I'm, working for this company. I'm getting an order for product that hasn't even, it's on the website, on this other company's website. It's on their site, but the products aren't even in the flower shop's stores. Not knowing that this was what you call an order gather. Sent them a note, said, oh, we don't have that product yet. We can do this, right? Great. And they said, fine. We got the order out, delivered within an hour, 2 hours. It wasn't far from our shop. Got a complaint that the customer wanted a full refund because it wasn't the picture. And the consumer who bought the order thought they were buying from a local flower shop because this company did their Google ads, like local florist in whatever. And so the consumer got duped. They overpaid. They got sold something that wasn't even available. And yet I'm supposed to, take the hit on this financially. I was really unhappy. Fired off a letter to the CEO of the company. Fired off a letter to a number of people because that wasn't the first time. And then the answers were, well, this is unacceptable. I'm like, yeah, no kidding. And I said, this is just, even though they're large volume, the reason they have a large volume is because they're order pirates. They pretend like they're local. Consumers don't understand where the money goes. They think the service charge is a delivery charge when the florist has to take the delivery out. And so, it was, for me, I got more and more agitated with all the duping. And I really became active in the SEO community, not just florists, but I'm talking about national SEOs. I tried to wrap my head around search engines. And I also really worked hard. I was a volunteer with the Open Directory Project, which is no more. But it was originally, that was the index and classifications that Google used to start their search engine. It was originally created back in, and also Yahoo used it. And I realized that the florists, quote unquote, florists that were listed in this directory were primarily order gatherers. And so I applied to be an editor, and then I had to teach all these other people that these weren't florists. These were affiliate marketers that were just looked like they were, national companies, and there's guys sitting in his bathrobe taking orders, right? I shouldn't say that, but it's like that. And turns out some of the editors who have been working on those projects were actually order gatherers, oddly enough, because a lot of them were SEOs, were search engine optimization people. I volunteered, and I worked really hard with that group to teach them about the industry, and it really changed the way that sites were cataloged, sites were, florist sites were put in the directory. And it was all volunteer because I was so frustrated. And it really helped me network a lot, though, to learn more about the way search engine work. Again, I'm not active in that part of it anymore. I'm older now and I don't have a retail store, but it was a great opportunity to, again, network outside the industry, to learn, and then to share, which I did freely with other florists about how they could improve their businesses on the web. And I never, and nobody ever paid me a cent for any of that. But I really felt like that was a way we could help get found. And as the orders got worse and worse and worse, and lower dollar values, and for products that we didn't carry, our shop had a signature look for the most part. And it just got to the point where a lot of the orders that were coming into us just weren't anything that we even carried, or a lot of the products in the picture weren't something we had. I decided to step away. And it was hard. It was a decision because the networking part was always so great. But we felt and this goes to with the, my husband's a former FTD national champion, America's Cup winner, stepping away from FTD first. And it was hard from an emotional standpoint, but it was from a fiscal standpoint, it made the most sense. And that's why, we are driven by emotion as florists. Let me say, nobody likes a cranky florist, but that seriously, but there's there's a place where in your head you say, this is not going to work. This relationship is not going to improve. And what do we need to do? I don't wish any of them ill will, but I do want florists to understand the math. There are shops that all they do, not shops, they're businesses that all they do is fill incoming orders. It works for them, and that's great. But I think from a standpoint now, we got to the point where we were a member of the B. Brooks group for a number of years, but it got to the point where a lot of consumers, if they were really picky, I would just give them phone numbers of local florists. Here, call them. They'll tell you exactly what they have in their cooler. And that's it. Why you don't need me in the middle. That's the crazy thing about the internet is so much of it was disintermediation, meaning there's a lot shorter path from like grower to buyer or whatever, like getting rid of the middleman. And what the internet did with the flower shops was insert a lot more middlemen in between, or several more middlemen in between the the florist and the consumer. So that's why it was important for me to wrap my head around the web and understand, how search engines think and how they work. And again, I'm not as up on the field as I was, 10 years ago, but I really feel like we need more people that care about that in this industry, that care about not just the, social media, which is a driver, but, web traffic it's the ultimate. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because I felt like for years and years and years, I would hear all the stories about, you're giving up a percentage, you might give up your delivery, then you're going to sit and wait to get paid, maybe 30, 60 days, depending on when everything, the transaction happened. And, there's a lot going on. And I feel like technology, the way it is today, I still think there could possibly be a beneficial networking service that maybe could be created, or maybe that is out there that isn't so, I don't know, that's more serving of the industry and less, just trying to, scrap.
Well, look, it's all about driving consumers and dollars. And if it doesn't work for a business because you might be busy, again, florists, don't equate being busy with being profitable. It's not the same thing. And one of my really good friends said this to me 10, 15 years ago. They were a big filler for one of the big national companies. They did, and because their philosophy had always been, when I do a good job, then that and deliver locally, then that customer will come to me, right? That was the
direct.
whole thing was, okay, and this is how, and that's how it worked for all of us for a lot of years. Well, then he finally clued in that he kept getting an order for the same people from the same company, and no matter how good job he did, it didn't bring any of these people back into him. So he finally had a chance to talk to one of the people who had made the purchase and said, oh, I get in my airline miles, I get, all these, benefits, perks from the national companies that you don't have. So that's why I call them. And I'm like, yep, see. But so as a local florist, we are not going to be able to offer that. But what we can offer is a better value, because if you can discount your arrangement by 30% for a wire service, why couldn't you discount it at least 10 for a local customer, right? I mean, that's what I don't get is, after all the fees and the commissions and all that, that you wouldn't do that regularly for your best customer. Why are you doing it? And the fees didn't used to be like that. The fees just crept up because of all the rebates that had to be paid. So it was this downward spiral that started. And there are some good benefits for florists that are still members of a wire service. And if it works for you, I think you should stay with it. But I mean, especially that, got keepsake containers and national marketing and all that. But if it doesn't work for you because it's not fitting with the point of view of your business, then you need to really rethink that relationship and see if it's an equitable relationship. Are you working for them or are they working for you?
Sure. Well, this has been such a great conversation, and I know every time I'm around you guys, I always learn stuff, and I always, I'm just grateful. I always like to end the episodes with an advice question, and I wanted to ask you specifically, like if there's a piece of advice that you would want, and you may have already said it, but just that you would want to give, like starting florists, people that are just beginning their journey. And because that's one of the questions I get more than anything, where do I begin? How do I get that education? Where, and that might not be your point, but I'm just curious. What would you tell people?
Well, definitely take some classes, because if you learn on the job, you don't know the quality of the person you're learning from. Even when I had my shop, I would send my students at that time. Well, at the beginning of my years of my shop, Phil had a school in Phoenix as well as one in California. So I would pay these people that had been with me that were ready to move to the next step of design, and have them go over there so they weren't distracted. So take a good class, because you can get an infusion of information. And whether it's in a community college or with our school or another professional school, do your due diligence to see if they're actually going to help you work towards a career. And then, listen and listen and listen, and then find the best shops you can, see if you can get a job there, because you're going to see pretty things and you're going to have opportunities. And then lastly is, when you are growing yourself, think about your own brand. How are you going to brand yourself as a designer, and eventually when you have a business, be your own brand? So that you don't want to be, the knockoff of somebody famous. You want to have a point of view that is uniquely you. But while those things are forming, you want to make sure that you take in as much information, as much education as possible.
Cathy, thank you so much.
Listen to the Flower podcast. You'll learn a lot.
Well, I especially appreciate that bit of advice. That's awesome. Thank you, Cathy. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Scott. Thank you so much.